In that case, I'm going to hand over straight away to Stefan. I don't think you need any introduction at this stage. So please welcome Stefan Keym.
Thank you very much. It is a great pleasure and also an honor for me to be here and to present my research. The Polish composer Eugeniusz Morawski is little known today, even in his own country. Yet he held a key position as director of the Warsaw Conservatory in the 1930s. However, this proved fatal to his posthumous reputation, as his appointment coincided with the involuntary departure of Karol Szymanowski, who, after his early death, was glorified as a martyr of Polish music. As Morawski had no deep-rooted networks in Poland due to his long exile in Paris, and as many of his compositions were destroyed during the Warsaw Uprising against the German occupation, his memory quickly faded. It is only in recent years that his works have been receiving more attention again. From a Lithuanian perspective, Morawski was, of course, above all the best friend and fellow of Mikalojus Konstantinas Čiurlionis. Both had dual artistic talents and studied together in Warsaw, first music and then fine arts. Morawski was also the recipient of a large part of Čiurlionis' letters from Leipzig during his study there in 1901-02. In this paper, I will take a closer look at Morawski's relationship with Čiurlionis. I give a brief biographical overview of their friendship and then present one of Morawski's main works that reveals important connections with Čiurlionis. Eugeniusz Morawski Dąbrowa was born in Warsaw in 1876, 1 year after Čiurlionis. He descended from a long-established family of the Polish gentry. His father, Arkadiusz, had taken part in the Polish January uprising of 1863-64 against the Russian occupation and was banished to Siberia for 6 years as a result. Later, he worked as an inspector for the railway and port in Warsaw. In 1895, Eugeniusz entered the Instytut Muzyczny, that is the Warsaw Conservatory, where he met Čiurlionis, who had been studying piano and composition already since 1994. While the Lithuanian musician completed his studies within 5 years, Morawski needed no less than 9. Čiurlionis became a close friend of Morawski and his family. He fell in love with Morawski's sister, Maria. However, the relationship was thwarted by her father and also disapproved of by Eugeniusz, who believed at that time that an artist should not be bound by marriage. Čiurlionis and Morawski probably met in the piano class of Antoni Sigiertyński, but attended the composition class of Zygmunt Noskowski, one after the other. Noskowski had studied with Friedrich Kiel in Berlin and contributed significantly to the late rise of symphonic music in Poland. This rise became evident in the opening of the Warsaw Philharmonic on 5th November 1901 as the first concert hall and permanent symphony orchestra on Polish soil. Čiurlionis was unlucky in that the new orchestra's first season coincided with his own studies at Leipzig Conservatory, so he was not there in the decisive moment. Just as he arrived at Leipzig in mid-October 1901, his overture Mischke received an honorable mention at a Warsaw competition. Morawski, to whom Čiurlionis had dedicated the overture, advocated for the work to be performed to Emil Młynarski, the Philharmonic's conductor. Such a performance was indeed announced for 4th February 1902, but ultimately did not take place, allegedly because Morawski insisted that Čiurlionis be identified in the program as a Lithuanian composer. Of the two friends' correspondence between Leipzig and Warsaw, 37 letters from Čiurlionis have been preserved, but only 5 from Morawski. Čiurlionis undoubtedly had more to report about his manifold impressions of the German music center. He was also often very lonely there. Some of Morawski's letters have been lost. Morawski supported Čiurlionis also financially during this period, because Čiurlionis lived in very poor conditions in Leipzig in spite of his scholarship provided by Count Oginski. At first, Čiurlionis tried to persuade his unstable friend to enroll at the Leipzig Conservatory as well. I quote, "My dear Eugeniusz, think carefully, move heaven and earth and come here. You will perish there in Warsaw without real work and with your constant quoi faire. You are not going to Morawski, you don't want to write fugues, so tell me, you idiot, what do you really want? Could you imagine my happiness with Eugeniusz in Leipzig? We would stroll together to the Conserva, to the Gewandhaus, to the theater, we would work together, we compete vigorously, we talk about God and the world." End of quote. However, Morawski's father would only have supported his son's studies in Leipzig if he had first obtained a basic degree at Warsaw, which he did not at that time. In their correspondence, the two friends primarily exchanged views on musical topics, their impressions of concerts, and above all, their latest compositions, which they often enclosed with their letters. A central topic was counterpoint and fugue. For example, Morawski presented his friend with a fugue he had composed on a theme reminiscent of Bach and Handel. Čiurlionis replied that he liked it very much and was surprised by its quality. However, he gave Morawski a series of detailed suggestions on how to improve the fugue and concluded, "I must admit I enjoy finding mistakes, and being able to find them allows me to recognize my progress." To further motivate Morawski, Čiurlionis suggested a kind of competition. Quote, "I absolutely must have the fugue that you dedicated to me and 2 themes from you so that I can then write a proper fugue for you." While the Lithuanian spent his academic year in Leipzig diligently writing canons, fugues, double fugues, Morawski had little desire to engage with counterpoint and also had general doubts about his talent for composition. He would have preferred to start an orchestral work right away, but the curriculum at both conservatories stipulated that this could only be done after completing numerous fugues and sonata movements for piano or chamber ensemble. Apparently, Čiurlionis sent Morawski some fugues so that he could submit them as his own to Morawski and thus complete the counterpoint lessons as soon as possible. I quote, "Don't worry about the fugues, just tell me how many you want. How I would love to do 1,000 times more for you than this little thing. But don't forget, our plan remains the same. I'll write fugues for you, you'll finish school in a year, and then we will move to St. Petersburg together." Čiurlionis repeatedly urged Morawski to work and painted a rosy picture of their future cooperation. "Oh, damn, if we could be together. You have to be begged, implored, or whipped into working. If you would work and I could earn your approval, we would move mountains. Really, Eugeniusz. Get yourself 1,000,000 rubles and we'll found an orchestra for your symphonies and my tone poems. That would be a sacred thing." The two friends also exchanged views on problems of form. Morawski considered academic forms to be nonsense and demanded that an artist should create his own forms, just as Liszt. Čiurlionis, on the other hand, believed that Morawski could learn a lot about form from Morawski. From Morawski, of course. While Morawski felt like a squeezed lemon when writing a sonata, Čiurlionis admonished him that the composer should have nothing else on his mind during the conception of a work. He regretted that his friend did not like the theme of an orchestral fantasy that he composed in Leipzig, but thanked him for his honesty and assured him that his opinion was very important to him, and much more than that of Noskowski or Karl Reinecke. He himself found Morawski's sonata wonderful and dealt in detail with the objections raised against it by Noskowski. I quote, "The transition is perfectly fine, but I think it's a little too conspicuous. The first bars present something completely new. Couldn't you connect it to the exposition? If not, never mind. A big compliment to you. In over 20 bars, there is hardly one bar of labor. From beginning to end, everything speaks and has character. This is exactly what I expected from you. Remember, I always said that I only feared your competition. I'm delighted that I was right. Eugeniusz, you will see we will have a great composer in you." End of quote. After returning to Warsaw in summer 1902, Čiurlionis attended Jan Kausik's drawing class, while Morawski needed another 2 years before finally completing his studies at the Music Institute, and without a public performance or an award. In contrast to him, Ludomir Różycki, the son of a piano professor, received an award and then transferred to the Berlin Academy of Arts as a master student of Engelbert Humperdinck. In 1905, Różycki, Grzegorz Fittelberg, and Karol Szymanowski, who had all studied composition with Noskowski, founded a publishing association of young Polish composers, which cooperated with the Berlin publisher Albert Stahl and was sponsored by Prince Władysław Lubomirski. The group gave 2 concerts each in Warsaw and Berlin with programmatic orchestral works modeled on Richard Strauss, which caused quite a stir in Warsaw, but also drew sharp criticism from some conservative journalists. At that time, there was a lot of activity in Warsaw concert life, but also a lot of competition for symphonic performance opportunities, which were rather limited due to the difficult political situation. Čiurlionis and Morawski did not belong to this group of young Polish composers. Nevertheless, they planned their own independent concert for autumn 1907 with their programmatic orchestral works Jura, Vae Victis, and Fleur du Mal. In the end, this concert did not take place. The main focus of the 2 friends at this time, however, was on the visual arts, as you know. In 1904, they both enrolled at the Szkoła Sztuk Pięknych that opened that year in Warsaw as a branch of the St. Petersburg Academy of Arts. They both took part in various plein-air events and exhibitions. They also undertook a joint trip to the Black Sea and to the Caucasus, and Morawski visited the Čiurlionis family twice in Truskininkai. Students at the new Warsaw Art School were obviously more involved in political activities than those at the Music Institute. Already from 1903 onwards, Morawski was a member of a revolutionary faction of the Polish Socialist Party that carried out attacks on Russian soldiers and policemen. On 3rd November 1907, he was arrested and, like his father before him, sentenced to be exiled to Siberia. Thanks to his father's intervention and presumably to a large amount of money, for which a part of the family estate had to be sold, this sentence was commuted to 4 years exile from Russian territory. So Morawski left Warsaw in March 1908 and settled in Paris. Very little information is available about Morawski's time in Paris. His name appears occasionally in reports by other Polish emigrants and travelers, but rarely in Paris music press. He primarily moved in circles of Polish expatriates who had been living in Paris in large numbers since the Polish November uprising of 1830-31, especially among the artistic bohemians of Montparnasse. In 1911, Morawski co-founded a new artistic organization, the Société des Artistes Polonais à Paris, and became its director in 1916. Morawski presumably financed his life in Paris through private piano and composition lessons. Initially, he also continued to take private lessons himself in the visual arts as well as in music. He deepened his studies of counterpoint with André Gédalch, a professor at the Paris Conservatory, whose students included Ravel, Honegger, and Milhaud. He also studied instrumentation with Camille Chevillard, the conductor of the Concert Lamoureux. Morawski's tone poem Ver Victis was premiered on 9th June 1910 in a concert of the Société Musicale Indépendante, but received rather little attention. Čiurlionis' artistic and personal development progressed once again more rapidly during these years. In autumn of 1907, he met Sofia Kymantaite in Vilnius, married her in January 1909, and moved with her to St. Petersburg. Čiurlionis and Morawski kept in touch, at least sporadically. In a letter from August 1909, Čiurlionis and Sofia took turns addressing their friend in Paris with humorous rhyming reflections on their youthful artistic existence. Morawski replied with a rather prosaic and melancholic letter. At the end of this letter, he quoted the proverb that those who are loved by the gods die young. When Čiurlionis was already seriously ill, Morawski is said to have written to mutual friends at the Warsaw Art School to organize help for him and his family. He was immediately informed by Sofia of Čiurlionis' death on 10th April 1911 and replied just one day later with a letter, the helplessness of which reveals how deeply this tragic event affected him. I quote, "My dear beloved Soshenka, it is difficult for me to write to you, for what can I write or reply? You know how dear my brother of heart was to me, my best friend, my golden, dear, irrepressible Kostusz. I suffer with you." End of quote. In the following years, Morawski and Sofia corresponded about plans for a posthumous publication of Čiurlionis' large-scale orchestra work, Jura, the score of which Morawski had in Paris for several years for correction. However, the project did not come to fruition, and contact was lost during the war. It is unclear who or what kept Morawski in Paris for over 20 years. He could have returned to his homeland as early as 1912, or perhaps after the re-establishment of the Polish state. In fact, he did not, until 1930, when he was offered the position of director of the conservatory at Poznań. Just a few months later, he took over the direction of the Warsaw Middle School of Music and a class in instrumentation. After Szymanowski's resignation, he became director of the entire Warsaw Conservatory in 1932. During the German occupation of Poland, he apparently participated in underground teaching activities. He died in Warsaw in 1948. Morawski's professional career may seem unusual at first glance. However, the sharp breaks, twists, and turns reflect the difficult political fate of Poland during his lifetime. So I now come to the second part of this paper, in which I will present the tone poem Nevermore, which is one of Morawski's main works and which reveals some important and hitherto little noticed connections to Čiurlionis. It was premiered on 6 January 1918 under Morawski's former teacher Camille Chevillard at the Concert Lamoureux in Paris. The date of composition is not entirely clear, but since the work was already mentioned in a Polish press article in early 1912, it must have been composed or at least begun in 1911. And this is the year of Čiurlionis' death. The autograph was destroyed during the Warsaw Uprising, but in 1959, Morawski's former student Tomasz Kiesewetter reconstructed the orchestral score from the surviving parts. There are also some rather new CD recordings. And on the left, this is a painting by Morawski, a late painting. Nevermore is a 15-minute poem symphonique for large post-romantic orchestra, and like most of Morawski's orchestral works, it is linked to a literary source of inspiration, the famous poem The Raven by the American novelist Edgar Allan Poe, who also inspired Morawski to some other works. His interest in Poe may have been awakened at the Warsaw Academy of Fine Arts already. In the very melancholic texts, I show only two stanzas here. The male lyrical subject, mourning his deceased lover Lenore, is haunted at night by a raven that repeatedly croaks nevermore. As expected, this piece begins very sombrely, in a low register, slow tempo, but not with a fantasy-like introduction, but quite the opposite with a fugato. The first theme is characterized by descending chromaticism in the tradition of passus triosculus and by uniform movement reminiscent of a funeral march. There is symmetrical ambivalence due to some syncopations, and the harmony is also rather ambiguous. Although the theme leads to a clear cadence in C minor, the melody begins on the lowered second, D flat, and after the cadence immediately modulates. Due to the recurrence of certain note, this theme is not dodecaphonic in the Schönbergian sense, but its continuation touches all the 12 steps of the chromatic scale. The fifth-based key scheme of the 4 entries of the fugato theme is rather traditional, as is the upward extension of the pitch ambitus and also the gradual crescendo. We will now listen to the beginning of this piece. The beginning is very quiet. There was some interference. Would be the best to stop it. Otherwise, we will hear it once again, and it will be 2 minutes and a half. You could skip the next 3 slides where the fugue is going on, and we will go directly. No, you have to go out of the presentation, otherwise it will begin again all the time. Yeah. So please, yes, it's the right thing to do. Excuse me. You find it in the on YouTube or elsewhere, both recordings. So it's always in this very sombre mode with 4 entries of the parts. Well, this fugue style is generally characterized as austere, restrained, or learned. Why did Morawski choose this style for the beginning of a tone poem linked to a romantic subject matter, and in spite of his own earlier aversion to counterpoint? In fact, the potential of polyphonic chromatic music to evoke melancholic, brooding modes had already been recognized earlier, especially by Wagner, for example, in the prelude to the third act of the Meistersinger von Nürnberg. In this case, however, there is apparently another personal explanation for this choice. The fugue style is used primarily in church and memorial compositions. In combination with the death subject of Poe's poem The Raven, it might be related to the premature death of Morawski's best friend, Čiurlionis. This interpretation is supported by the change of the work's title from The Raven to Nevermore, since Morawski never saw Čiurlionis again after his exile in 1808. The fact that Čiurlionis himself had a close affinity to counterpoint and chromaticism and tried to convey this to Morawski also suggests that Nevermore, and especially its beginning, was intended as a tribute in memoriam to Čiurlionis. Furthermore, Čiurlionis' unfinished symphonic poem, The Creation of the World, the draft of which is dated March 907, that is before the two friends parted ways, also begins with a fugato theme based on a similar chromatic theme, starting also on C. This is it's the second line, this theme, and it was Charis Eftimiou who showed me this theme. I think there is a relationship there. The contrapuntal continuous flow of the first part of Morawski's tone poem stands out against the backdrop of the rest of this composition, which is very rhapsodic, as you see here. The traditional sequence of fantasy and fugue seems to be reversed. There's first the fugue and then the fantasy, so to say. The fugato theme serves as a sort of refrain-like point of reference, similar to the raven's leitmotivic cry, nevermore, 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 in Poe's poem. The refrain constantly alternates with other material. The result is a discontinuous mosaic with many new beginnings, changes of themes, keys, and tempo, which obviously corresponded to Morawski's unstable character. Despite this discontinuity, the composition does not fall apart thanks to the conciseness of its thematic material and its novel dramaturgy. Each of the 5 sections, besides the coda, is characterized by a dramatic wave-like increase of tension. After the somewhat unexpected end of the opening fugato section, there is the theme B, exposed by the English horn, which is a typical lament instrument, at least since Wagner's Tristan. This theme functions as a single-like motto motive with a clearly defined character which can hardly be modified. It's always the same. The second section, in this section, theme B alternates 4 times with short breath variants of the fugato theme A in faster tempos. Some rustling entries by the 2 harps might be interpreted as a programmatic evocation of Poe's Raven. However, in the rest of the piece, there is no close orientation to Poe's poem discernible. We will now listen to the fast version of this theme and then to the theme B. So this theme B is clearly a theme of lament. And what becomes clear here too, I think, is the quality of and originality of Morawski's instrumentation. This was, he later led a class in instrumentation at Warsaw Conservatory. After this first climax, the harmony shifts to the major mode for the first time and opens to the third section, which displays calmer and more continuous tempo. Nevertheless, this section is also characterized by frequent and strong mood changes, which can be easily recognized in the ups and downs of the melody. The melodic line is first carried over 1.5 octaves upward by the horn and by some other instruments. It is characterized by expressive suspensions, by rhythmical irregularity and a modulation towards D flat major. And from this point on, this allows Morawski to tip over the melody on the long peak note F and then to let it sink again plaintively with a B flat minor scale and again with the English horn, oboe and cellos. So for me, this is C1 is the upward theme and C2 is the downward theme, which is a free inversion of C1. Following to the little model from Poe, this section could be related to the lyrical subject's positive memories of the past, which are repeatedly clouded by the awareness of the loss of the beloved, or if we take this biographic interpretation, the loss of the friend. So we will listen to this theme now. The third section leads to a rather freely polyphonic and dense orchestral development section, as found often in the works of Wagner, Strauss, and their successors. After a second climax, the fourth section presents a new theme, the last one, theme D, Tranquillo, introduced by the cellos in D flat major. This theme shares the ascending melodic movement with the theme C1, but is more cantabile and enthusiastic and is accompanied by a dense orchestral texture, as in many post-romantic Tristan-like love scenes. The poetic reference to Poe's Lenore is quite obvious here. At the same time, the late epiphany of this female-gendered theme again provides a biographical reference. For Čiurlionis, found the woman of his life, Sophia Kymanteite, also rather late in life, 3.5 years before his death. From the perspective of the sonata tradition, it is unusual for an important theme to be exposed so late in a work. Presumably, this new dramaturgy of form was inspired by the poetic idea of the work, as Franz Liszt had demanded for the genre of the symphonic poem, and as young Morawski himself postulated in his correspondence with Čiurlionis. This dramaturgy bears a resemblance to Čiurlionis' tone poem Jura, in which a new theme, in that case with Lithuanian influences, is also introduced rather late in the recapitulation section of his symphonic landscape painting. We will now listen to this theme D. A second entry of this theme D leads to the third and most powerful climax of the whole work, which turns into an apocalyptic final allegro in which the thematic material dissolves and which culminates in a violent march with abundant percussion. The military connotation is difficult to reconcile with Poe's immediate, intimate poem. From the autobiographical perspective, it is conceivable that Morawski is alluding here to his own final separation from Čiurlionis caused by his arrest. This is the last music example. The definitive collapse, marked by a strike of the tam-tam, a sonic symbol of death, is followed by a decrescendo coda section leading to the final extinction in triple pianissimo without a clear key. This morendo ending is rather modernistic in its ambivalence. Morawski's tone poem Nevermore is a remarkable contribution to young Polish symphonic music, which in several respects appears more modern than the orchestral works written by Szymanowski, Różycki, or Mieczysław Karbowicz at the same time. In its novel form, which breaks consequently with classical models, there's no sonataphone here. In its original orchestration, characterized by many uncommon combinations of timbres, and also in its expressionistic mood. Apart from the reference to Poe's poem in the title, Morawski has made no statements about the semantics of Nevermore. So we do not know for certain to what extent he actually wrote the work in memoriam to his best friend Čiurlionis, whether this was rather a private subtext or perhaps only an initial idea. In any case, it is a work that has many references to Čiurlionis, who would certainly have liked it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for that fascinating account. I think we have time for some questions, if that's all right. Does anyone have a particular question for Mr. Keym? No? No? Yes, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you.
Noriu padėkoti Stefanui. Ir šitą klausimą aš uždaviau Leipcige, bet aš matau, kad jūs dabar skaitėt visus laiškus. Ir galbūt jūs atsakysite. Mano klausimas buvo toks. Po Čiurlionio mirties vis tiek vyko susirašinėjimas, ar ne? Vis tiek rašė Sofija, jinai netgi atidavė simfoninės poemas, kad galbūt jisai pataisytų ir galima būtų jas atlikti. Bet kai reikėjo atsimti tas simfoninės poemas rankraščius, tai buvo gana sunku. Ir jūs žinot, jinai nuvažiuoja į Paryžių, Sofiją, ir bando susitikti su Eugenijum. Bando. Ir kai jinai nueina į namus, jo vis neranda ir jai net netidaro durų. Vėliau, aišku, tas partitūras jinai atsiėmė per svetimus žmonės, bet tas susitikimas asmeniškas neįvyko. Kažkodėl vengė Sofijos. Ar jums dabar nepaaiškėjo iš tokios gilesnės analizės, iš laiškų, nes tikrai labai džiaugiuosi, kad Štefanas skaito lenkiškai ir aš manau, kad jūs gerokai paskaitėt laiškus, ar ne? šitą korespondenciją. Taip, čia yra tikrai retas dalykas ir tai baisiai svarbu. Tai va dabar galbūt jūs atsakymą žinot, kodėl Morawskis vengė Sofijos po mirties susitikimo, kuris specialiai nuvažiavo į Paryžių susitikti. Ir sunkiai grąžino po to partitūras. Tiesą sakant, labai tikėjo, Jadvyga labai tikėjosi, kad jisai kažką pakoreguos, pataisys, bet jis nieko nepadarė. Tai galbūt tada, reiškia, Čiurlionio partitūros visgi buvo geresnės ir ar jisai nerado, ką taisyti jose. Jisai tik tai vienoje vietoje tempą pataisė. O šiaip tai jis nieko nekoregavo. Tai čia antras klausimas. Gal Morawskis manė, kad jos yra pakankamai geros ir nenorėjo kišti rankų. Tai čia du mano klausimai. O šiaip tai Štefanui labai esu dėkinga, nes tai yra tikrai mūsų draugas Leipcige ir už tą konferenciją. Čia ponas Losas sėdi, noriu padėkoti oficialiai ir garsiai už konferenciją, kurią jie surengė Leipcigo universitetas skirtą Čiurlioniui. Gegužės 15, ten dar kažkur 16, atrodo dar. Prašau.
Yes, it was a pleasure for us to organize this conference. Concerning Jura, as far as I know and as far as Charis told me, Morawski has nothing changed in this time when the manuscript was in Paris. He had copied a part of the piece before in 1907, probably in the time when they wanted to do this concert in Warsaw. I do not know why he did not react when Jadwiga came to Paris, and he certainly was a very difficult character. That's clear. It's difficult to know. The published correspondence goes up to the death of Čiurlionis. It does not go further. I have read some later letters which I found in the doctoral dissertation of Oskar Łapeta, who has written a dissertation on Morawski in Poland. So apart from this, I have not more sources. There are many secrets around Morawski. Why did he stay in Paris all the time? What did he do there? I have another question which seems important to me, and perhaps somebody, Mr. Okulic, Korsarian, or somebody else might answer. This is the question: if Sophia Kymantaite and Morawski have ever met, because the moment when Morawski was arrested in Warsaw in November 1907, it was almost exactly at the same moment when Čiurlionis was in Vilnius and met for the first time Sophia. So I do not know if they ever personally met these two. It is a strange coincidence that exactly at that moment when the friendship of Morawski and Čiurlionis was interrupted, exactly at this moment he discovered Sophia. For me, this is not clear. I do not know if before Morawski had to leave the country in March 1908, there was any possibility to meet Čiurlionis again and perhaps to become acquainted with Sophia. I do not know this. Perhaps you can answer or somebody else can answer. I cannot. It is a question which is open for me.
They definitely wouldn't meet each other. They hardly know about about them. So it's this letter you've quoted here.
Yeah.
There's with this poem.
Yeah.
Humoristic.
Yes.
So that's the only sign of their acquaintance.
Yes.
But nothing more. And then this moving letter you quoted as well, dealing with the death of Čiurlionis. And we know the same.
Yes, apparently there are no more sources. So that even this long rhyming letter, apparently this was an idea by Sophia to write it together with Čiurlionis, but an idea to write a letter to somebody whom she did not really personally know at that time. So the contact was not so close as one might have believed. And apparently after this condolences letter after the death, this connection did not go on very well. Yesterday somebody also asked, or I found interesting that in 1910 some pictures by Čiurlionis were shown in Paris, but as Russian paint in the Russian circles. And Morawski, he founded this new Polish circle in 1911, but these circles, of course, had no contact, since Poland and Russia seriously competed in Paris. And so apparently they were, well, Morawski certainly was aware of that fact, that pictures of, I suppose, of his friend were shown, but he certainly did not take place in this event.
Girdisi, ar ne? Trumpai įsiterpsiu. Taip, ačiū labai už įdomų pranešimą. Man yra tekę parašyti monografiją apie Sofiją Čiurlionienę Kymantaitę ir dirbti memorialinėme, būtent privačiame jos muziejuje su archyvais. Tiek, kiek aš irgi susipažinusi su, iš tikrųjų, daugiau jie nekontaktavo ir ji buvo iš tikrųjų užsigavusi ant Morawskio dėl to nebendravimo ir nepaaiškinimo, kodėl bendrauja, kodėl nėra to ryšio, kodėl yra delsiama grąžinti rankraščius. Tai manau, kad kažkas galbūt, kažkokie tarpininkai galbūt kažkokį tą santykį sugadino, nes iš tikrųjų buvo labai daug interpretacijų. Čiurlioniui susirgus, daug interpretacijų, kodėl maždaug ji taip mažai su Čiurlioniu bendravo. Galbūt čia yra priežastis, bet noriu priminti, kad tuo metu ji laukėsi, tuo metu ji gimdė. Jinai parsivežė Čiurlionį sergantį iš Peterburgo, būdama nėščia. Ir jinai pradėjo labai anksti dirbti tam, kad prisidėtų prie jo gydymo. Taigi žinome, kad tai yra sudėtingos tuo metu moteriai, turinčiai mažametį kūdikį, metų neturinti kūdikį, tai yra tikrai labai sudėtingos aplinkybės.
Yes, sure.
Going back to technical stuff, I will show you maybe that in Miške of Čiurlionis, he writes at the beginning largo, sorry, and then double. Where shall I go? May I go there? Me to go there? I just want to make a question. And he, after the double line, he notated adagio cantabile espressivo. Nowadays we call it, this is the C subject, but if someone sees the score, will immediately think that maybe that's the B theme. And I can show it to you, and I think maybe you will find a correlation with the B theme of Nevermore. Yes, so perhaps I want to later to show. I have it. Yeah, that's only.
Yes, thank you.
Maybe there is also something considering also Miške and not only Europe.
Perhaps.
Perhaps.
At least this B theme is it is also part of several other works by Morawski. So for Morawski, it had a great importance, this theme.
That's it.
Thank you very much for question which I really liked, and I want to come back to orchestration, which you mentioned. I'm not going into technical issues at all. So I'm questioning myself, and I was struck by the orchestration because the piece was, if I did understand, stood you correctly, composed in 1911 around this period. So that's totally anti-French orchestration during this period. So my question is actually, when you actually situate the piece in the cultural framework of Paris, what does it tell us? Because it's so far away from that what actually was around in the 1910s. And then actually the second, which is just a side remark, because I have no clue about how far the music of Mahler was actually performed in Paris during that period. I have no clue. I don't know. Because there are parts in the orchestration which you showed us, which really link to this kind of idea or techniques, which is so far away from that what we are actually used to here when it comes to 1910, 1911, 1912 Paris context.
There is one Mahler performance in, I think in 1910. I'm not very sure, but I will just thank you very much for this hint. I will look for this. In general, I think Morawski did not know very well Mahler's music at the time, since it was not so much played. It is clear that Morawski, just as Čiurlionis, both of them came from the Middle European, so Germanic tradition, and they were rather far away from this French tradition. Morawski, he had some performances in Paris, but never much success. In Paris, the journals always, the critics said, it sounds very German, very Russian. It is not, but Russian not in the new sense, but in the old sense, and they did not like it. He had no great success there, and he was apparently rather isolated. I do not know if his qualities and instrument, if he, in spite of that, learned something technically with Chevillard. This might be an open question. He did not like the music of Debussy either. Even if the third three notes of the Fugato theme are similar to a theme from Le Martyr de Saint-Sébastien, I showed this in the music example, which was created exactly in the same year, 1911, in Paris. So apparently he might have been there. This was a great scandal, this piece. But what Debussy does with this theme is completely different of what Morawski does. Richard Strauss is and Wagner, this is certainly the common ground of Morawski, of young Polish composers, and also of Čiurlionis for this orchestral music. However, I think he has his sort of his own individual way to work with this, and I really recommend to listen to this piece completely. It's an extraordinary music.
Thank you very much. I think if we have yes, please. Yeah.
So what he did in Paris, being an artist, for me, it's obvious. He was taking art lessons, maybe enrolling himself in one of the academias, like Julian Academy and others, because during this time there were many, Russian painters, for example, Sonia Delaunay, who came just for that purpose, to study art in these private academies. And you showed us his painting. It's a very, he was an accomplished painter also in the style of Claude Monet. So this is what he was studying, the Impressionism, something that Čiurlionis didn't have a chance to see and to study. Maybe.
Even if, he had the métier, but he was not so original as a painter as Čiurlionis, that's very clear. And the paintings which have survived are late paintings, I think mostly from the time of the Second World War, when he had a lot of free time and he painted.
Oh, just a quick comment. In according to what Professor Baldassare said before, I remember that Marcin Gmys links Morawski style to the style of Florent Schmitt in Paris. So perhaps this is the link.
This might be a common point, since Schmitt is a somewhat more conservative composer, a pupil of Fauré. It's an interesting fact. In general, that's a good occasion to say that it was Marcin Gmys who has showed to me and also to the first this German conductor the score. It was his idea to revive this composer. Thank you.
Well, that's everything. Thank you very much indeed for a fascinating program.